Introduce ourselves. Both Hannah and I are part of Med Mentors. My name is Zindabir, and I'm a second-year medical student at the University of Washington. I'll let Hannah introduce herself.
I'm Hannah. I'm a second year at Western in Southern California. And so just want to say, again, thanks for coming out. We know that your time is super valuable, but we really love the support. And so just so you know, if you don't follow Med Mentors on social media, on Facebook, on Instagram, or check out their website, there's a lot of things that Med Mentors offers that could be super beneficial to you as you move into application season. Also, forewarning, my dog is running around, so if you hear something weird, it's him being needy. So we're also going to be sharing a flyer at the end that has a QR code for our next session and a feedback. So please stick around for that. We absolutely love your feedback, and we learn a lot from you because we haven't really done this for that long. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We'll get to them. We have some open Q&A at the end. And for the schedule of events today, we're going to be doing kind of the first little bit. We're going to be talking about the gap year, and then after follow up with our awesome panel to discuss the application. Each one of our panelists has a specific application that they're going to be representing, so it's your time to kind of listen to their expertise on that. And then, so Indy, do you want to start off about kind of where you go to school? I know you already mentioned that, but what you did with your gap year, how long you took, and if you liked it, or what would you do differently?
Yeah, for sure. So, hello everyone. Once again, my name is Zindabir. I'm a second-year medical student at the University of Washington. So my journey a little bit, how it started. So I was a junior and I was planning on going to medical school straight in right after undergrad. That was my initial plan, but unfortunately I didn't get in during my senior year. And so I reevaluated, and what I ended up doing was I actually took 2 years off. Um, I think of it as taking 2 years off, but I think most people might not agree with that. I actually ended up doing a master's right after my undergrad, and it was a master's in health policy and health administration. And it was something that I was really passionate about, and so after not being accepted, I really wanted to take some time off of like working on my medical school application and sort of focus in on some other things that really interested me and intrigued me. And so I ended up pursuing that degree. And it was nice because it allowed you to have a job along with it. So I worked throughout the time. And so I made some money and I got more healthcare experiences because that was something I was lacking in my first application. And so that's what I ended up doing with my 2 years after. And so I took 2 gap years doing a master's degree, and then I went right into medical school. So I guess I've been in medical school this whole time, not medical school this whole time. Sorry, I've been in schooling this whole time. And so if I was to change anything, I would have honestly not applied um, straight out of the gate my junior year being an undergrad student. I would have taken some time off and actually got more experience and built my application some more, and I to apply and be a better candidate. Because it was hard, applying to medical school. It's a lot of work, as a lot of you are finding out. I had to restudy and redo the MCAT. I had to redo my entire application, redo a personal statement. So it's a lot of work. So if I could go back and do things over, I would definitely um, take my time, get more experience, and better understand the process. So it's a little bit about my journey.
Great, thank you. So I just launched a poll in the chat because I'm pretty curious to see who's wanting to take a gap year. So just answer that if you have a chance. So my experience is a little bit different, which I think that this is really such a cool topic because people sometimes are maybe questioning why we put these two together. It's because you're either going to take a gap year or fill the application. So that's kind of why we put these two together. But for me, I graduated undergrad in 2016. So I took the MCAT in 2015, which seems like forever ago. So I actually ended up taking the MCAT twice. For the first time, I wanted to take just one gap year. I went home, studied, did the whole thing. And then the day before my MCAT, I was a big biker and I broke my arm. I like just a whole thing. So I ended up not doing well in the MCAT. And so it's emotionally draining, as Indy said, to not do how you expect to do with the amount of work you put in. So I kind of took that time to myself to reevaluate what I wanted. So I ended up moving to Quantico, Virginia, like the show, if you've ever seen that. And I moved in with my boyfriend at the time. And lucky enough, I liked him and we're now married and celebrating our 4th year wedding anniversary next month. So we got married. I became a teacher. I became a chief scribe. All during that like next year, just trying to build experiences because you kind of go from your undergrad with no experience into the world trying to figure out what to do. So I kind of wanted to build on that. I ended up studying for the MCAT again, moving out to California. I worked as a consultant for a cancer company, just trying to like get more experience and get some money because this field is super expensive to start out in. And then I ended up applying to like 20 schools. I got all my applications in, all my secondaries. I got 4 interviews at both DO and MD schools and ended up picking a DO school that I absolutely love. And then I took 6 months off right before I got in and then booked a ticket to Thailand and traveled for 6 months. So I kind of did all of the things you can do in a gap year in 3 years. So I have a lot of experience. So if you have any questions on any of those, just reach out and send me an email and I can help answer those. But so I traveled Southeast Asia and Australia by myself. My husband is in the military and was deployed. So I said, if you're leaving, I'm leaving. So I really wanted to travel. It's something I've always wanted to do. And then I started in August of 2020. And yeah, I feel really fulfilled. I think that a lot of people who take gap years really want to do something more before you sort of sign over your soul in a way. But I really am lucky that I had the opportunity to take the gap year. But also know that this is like our story and there's literally no right way to do this. It just worked for us. So take this all with a grain of salt. And everything you hear from people who are attending medical school now, that it's our story in our life. And yeah, take that as you will. So with the poll, we have 20 people taking a gap year, 1 person no, and then 1 person don't know yet, which is pretty expected. So does anyone have any questions for the gap year portion that we can answer for you? You can come on the mic or put it in the chat.
To echo some of the traveling, I think that, oh, sorry, we had a question. Yeah.
Yeah, hi, I have a question. Sorry.
Might have froze.
Yeah, I think Elizabeth, you froze.
Feel free to type it in if that's
Sorry.
something to.
Elizabeth, do you want to try turning off your camera and trying to talk from there? Because that could probably be the issue.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me now or not yet?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Okay, my connection turned off for a second. You're like your job.
Oh shoot, Elizabeth, sorry, your connection is really wobbly. Do you want to try again?
Okay. Yes, sorry about that. Let me type it.
Okay, great. Sorry. We love the interaction though. I feel like we're actually in person. As we wait for Elizabeth's question, Carly asked, do you think schools' expectations for gap year activities will change with COVID? Indeed, do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, I think I think with COVID, people are probably, I think there's a lot more creativity in what people are doing because thankfully now it's opening up more, but I think people maybe volunteering or different health experiences or volunteer opportunities totally changed during COVID. And so I think it's not that they're expecting anything different. I think they're just expecting you to really know why you did the things that you did and why are they important to you. And so I don't think the expectations are going to change. I think you're just going to have to really be able to share like why you did what you did and be confident with that. I think that's the most important thing. I don't think there's necessarily a, you know, like Hannah was saying, everyone's experience is different and everyone has different stories. And so if you're able to convey that, I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, totally agree with that. I'm gonna answer the next question. Did you ever feel pressure from taking a gap year or being behind at the beginning of your journey? I think this is a really great question because for me personally, if I would have went to med school as a 21-year-old, I would be a disservice to my patients. I'm not saying that's the case for everyone, but for me personally, I grew up so much in those 3 years that I became a person that I'm pretty proud of and that I feel like I can talk to my patients and be a good physician for them. Whereas before I was pretty selfish person, and I'm okay to admit that because I was. And looking back, I'm glad I didn't get in. The fact that feeling pressured for taking a gap year, no, because when you're in school, the range of your classmates are honestly from 19, honestly, like 19 to 20 to all the way to 30, 40. So you're all on different walks of life with the same goal. So you kind of build each other up based on kind of camaraderie of being in the same situation together. So if you don't feel pressured, if you don't put that on yourself, then it's going to be a good journey. But a lot of the medical school journey is your self-evaluation of how you're doing. It's super mental, and you need to overcome that yourself. Next question, did having your degree in undergrad really help you get jobs regarding pay and experience for your gap year?
Yeah, I guess I was doing my master's and also had a degree, so I think my master's helped me. But if I was to look for maybe some other sorts of jobs, I guess it just depends what your degree is, but I think it definitely gives you leverage, right? If you have a degree and you know you're experiencing something, you're gonna most likely get a better paying job. So I think this is great leverage to have because obviously you have a lot of expenses and you want to start paying back maybe loans that you have. So yeah.
I think you'll find that the workplace or the work field is really difficult to find a job, especially for our generation, because they want experience, but you can't get experience without having a job. So it's really difficult. So just when you start applying for jobs, if that's your route during your gap year, be resilient and apply everywhere. I think scribing is like, I made $11 an hour and it didn't even pay for my gas. So, I mean, it's just kind of what you got to do especially someone, for me, I had zero experience. I was a bartender in college, so that's all I had under my belt. How did you structure your gap year? I'm finding it difficult figuring out a timeline since acceptance into master's programs and eventually med school is still unpredictable. Indy, how did you structure your gap year, or did you wing it?
You know, I sort of had to wing it after I wasn't accepted. You know, if I have advice for all of you out there, if you're deciding not to take a gap year and you're going to go in, um, just always have a backup plan. I think I really honestly didn't have a backup plan, and so I was kind of scattering, and so I winged it. But I think I knew one thing after I wasn't accepted. I was like, I really need a gap year. I need to take some time off, and so I winged it, and I think recognized that, hey, I need to take a gap year. So wasn't as much structure to it.
I winged my gap year. I just went where the world took me, which is probably not the best idea. But I had 3 years where most people have 1 and need to plan it. So to structure it, just kind of set out your goals and see what's possible. And especially with COVID, be flexible, because how med schools are accepting students now is different from how all of us got in, because it is a time of COVID. And I do think they're being lenient, but they're also seeing how creative you can be with your time. I'm just gonna check the
Did we want to
time.
answer?
Oh,
Oh, I was going to say, there's a question in here about if you're going to take a gap year, how do you go about asking professors for letters of recommendation? I think, what did I do? I definitely kept in touch with them and I let them know early. I know some professors, if they're really on top of it, they'll get it done right away because they'll know you were in their classes at the time you're in undergrad. But if you ask them 2-3 years out of undergrad, they might not even remember you. So if you can be proactive and somehow be able to get some of those letters of recommendation maybe beforehand, that would be preferential. But there's, of course, it's not just your schools like letters of recommendation that you're trying to get. You're going to have different jobs and different volunteer opportunities, maybe research that you do. You're obviously going to have letters of recommendation from that, and so you're going to have a lot more choices.
I think that if you build connections with the people you want to ask from letters from, you can continue to ask them. I asked letters for 3 years in a row from the same people because I was like, I think it's time. I think I'm going to apply this year, and it just didn't work out. So if you have just a good relationship with them from the beginning and let them know that you'll be asking them again in the future, just keep that relationship open. So Bo, you have a really great question. Do you mind putting that in the chat when we have our panel speak? Because I think they could speak to that a lot better than we could. And then someone asked, why would someone consider doing a master's program? The expenses for master's, the medical school must be expensive. Would that be a boost in someone's med school application? I think this is such a great question and such a big kind of realm of unknown. Indy, sorry, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think this was something that was always on top of my mind. Like, I'm doing this master's. I wasn't necessarily doing it to boost my application. I was doing it solely. I mean, part of it was like, yeah, it'll make me look better. But I think honestly, the biggest piece of this is that why are you doing it? Are you doing it because you just want to boost your application, or is this something you're actually really passionate about? And it's something you can talk about during your interviews, during your application. I think that's the biggest reason to do a master's. I don't think you should just go out of your way. Hey, I just want to look better. That's why I should do a master's degree. Because I think that also makes it more difficult to get through it. It's usually a 2-year process, and so that's my recommendation. I think it will boost you if you're able to show that there's a reason you did it and you're really passionate about it.
Yeah, I agree so much, because it's medical school will know when you're doing something for the application. They will know as soon as you put it down. They're really looking for students who are passionate and do stuff because they want to. And with that being said, someone asked, is there anything you would have done differently? Or is there anything, did I read that right? Yeah, if is there anything you wish you've done during your gap year but didn't? I'll speak to this while Andy thinks. I think it's just to give yourself grace. There's so many things, and most of us are type A, bless those people who are type B and going into medical school. But we really have high functioning expectations of ourselves. And if you don't get in or something happens that changes your path, just give yourself grace, because at the end of the day, no matter where you go, no matter what you do, someone's going to call you doctor if you really want it. So just put your head down and grind. And if you take a gap year, then take it and enjoy your life. Like there's so many things that you can do and there's so many ways you can do it. And if you can explain that on an application and you can be passionate about it, then schools are going to see that. And I think that's so great. And that's what makes people unique. And those are the people that you want as your classmates. And those are the people you want as your doctors.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like there's so much pressure, especially in undergrad when like you're with that pre-med cohort, you have so many people around you that you're looking at and like that person's getting accepted or they're applying right now. And it makes you feel like maybe, hey, I'm behind, I should be applying. But again, I think Hannah said it best when she was talking about everyone has their own journey. Don't look at the people around you, look at what's good for you and what you need and maybe what things you need to strengthen. um, I would have to say I really admire my classmates who took multiple years off. They have so many valuable experiences, and I look up to them so much. So um, I can't say enough about taking a gap year. You owe it to yourself. You spent a lot of time working hard. So give yourself grace. I agree with that.
Well, we are now going to wrap up this section of the talk. If you do have any questions, please shoot us an email or kind of hang out a little bit and we can try to answer them. But now we're going to introduce our awesome panel. Do we have everyone on? Dr. Alex, Olivia, are you here? And Deborah is here. Okay, so we're missing one of our panelists, but that is okay. We are going to keep moving on. If you want to, our panelists can come on the camera. We're gonna just have you introduce yourself, introduce what application you are representing, your favorite part of the application, your least favorite part of the application, and any advice that you would give as people try to like enter into this realm of trying to apply. So Dr. Alex, would you like to go first?
Yeah, for sure. Hey, everybody. I'm Alexandra Witt. I recently became Dr. Alex. But as far as applications go, I graduated from a Caribbean medical school, specifically American University of Antigua. My favorite part of the application, I would say, is activities, because that's where you can really show your personality and your passion. And my least favorite part has to be the personal statement. It is always the hardest part for me to write and think of. And there really is a strategy to it that you have to consider. So for me, that was the hardest and probably worst part of the application.
Deborah, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I can go. Hi, everyone. I'm Deborah. I am a first-year osteopathic medical student. I go to Kansas City University, and I would say the best part about the application, so I'll be talking about the osteopathic application. The best part about it, I think it's just like being able to just reflect on all you've done to get to that point. I think writing the application, like putting into words like all of the activities and everything that I had done, while tedious, it really just put things into perspective for me. And that was like so rewarding in and of itself. And my least favorite part would be the secondary. It's just like writing those, man. And I applied to so many schools. I feel like I was writing for like a month nonstop. So if you can pre-write those, that's like the biggest piece of advice I would tell all my mentees, is just to pre-write as much as you can. But yeah, a piece of advice I would give, this sort of goes hand in hand with pre-writing, is to start early. I think applying to medical school is hard no matter what, like even if you start early or start like at the last minute, but if you can alleviate some stress by, getting some things out of the way, it can be a little bit more enjoyable. So yeah.
Thank you so much. And I see Olivia has joined us. Hi, Olivia. So we're just introducing ourselves, where you go to school, what year you're in, and then what application you are representing, and your least favorite and favorite part of the application.
Of course. Hi, my name is Olivia. I am a first-year medical student at Rush Medical College in Chicago. I actually applied to both MD and DO, so I guess I can kind of speak to both of those. I ended up at Rush as an MD school. I'd say I heard Deborah going before me, but I would say also agreeing that just kind of the time-consuming nature of the secondary essays is something that I didn't love. I also applied to a good number of schools, so it's time-consuming. So just having that mindset going into it is really helpful, so you can plan accordingly and not be stressed. I really loved, I'm trying to think my absolute favorite part. I really did like writing my personal statement. I really enjoy writing, and I took a lot of writing classes in college. And I think it was really a nice time for kind of self-reflection of like, wow, why do I actually want to do this? And being able to put it into like one cohesive piece of writing that you can come back to. And like, I don't know, I've read it a few times. My roommates and I, when we first moved in, did a cheesy thing where we all read each other our personal statements. And I don't know, it's just really empowering to think of all the things you've done and like what shaped you to want to pursue the path that everyone here is interested in. And then a piece of advice I would give is just remember, I feel like truthfully everything happens for a reason. I applied twice to medical school. I did not get in the first time. So keeping in mind that I do feel like everyone ends up at a place that like they were supposed to be at, and there's no timeline on being a doctor. I think that is like that last phrase is a piece of advice that I received very late in the game, and I think it would have calmed a lot of my nerves if I had heard that sooner.
Thank you so much. I think it's really funny how all of you said that you liked and didn't like different things. So one of you may have hated it while one of you liked it. So as I said before, take people's opinions with a grain of salt because you never know what you'll like or not like. Does anyone have any specific questions? And you can direct them toward a specific individual, or it can be broad and if any of the panelists align with that, they can speak up. We do have quite a few questions that were pre-submitted. So Indy, do you want to ask some questions off that?
Yeah, I think we get this question so often, and it's that in what ways can students stand out when putting their application together? I feel like I'm always seeing that kind of question. How do I stand out, or how do I look different?
I can take a quick stab first. Something that I like to share with people and that I've heard a lot now that like you're kind of on the other side of it, being a student, and I'm actually fortunate enough to be involved with some of the recruitment process at my school, but they really want to see that you're passionate about something. So I wouldn't necessarily feel like you need to like find some like obscure box to check that like, oh, I did this off the wall thing that no one else has done. I think that what really stands out and it is going to show in your application and in your interview process is if you have something like a common theme that you are really passionate about and have multiple life experiences that kind of point to that passion. And I think that that's something that you're going to want as you go through medicine. You want to have those things as like your reason why, and that you can keep coming back to when you're going through some of like the hard parts of training and school and testing. So yeah, I would say not necessarily thinking, what do I do to stand out, but asking yourself, what am I passionate about? And you should just be pursuing those passions and make that very clear to your readers or your interviewers.
I kind of agree more with Olivia. I do a lot of editing with secondaries and personal statements and such, and application review. And I see a lot of applications that people are doing so many different things in their application, and it really shows to admission committees, well, what are you passionate about? You have this over here and this over there, but there's no common theme in any of it. And so I always advise that they try to at least try to find some type of commonality between the experiences that they have and go off of that. But if you're still early in the process and you know something that you're passionate about, stick with it and really find something, because it will show. Trust and believe, it will show through your application.
Yeah, I think everyone else touched on what I would say. I think consistency is important. Like if you're involved in something, showing that you can be consistent, and even though like things get hard, if you're going through hardships, being able to adapt and go through those things and what you learned from it is also something that's really important.
I see a question here from Carly. I can kind of explain to that. So I recently actually matched into pediatrics, which is my, thank you, which has been a passion of mine since I was a kid myself. So for me, I had experience in middle school and high school where I was always doing summer basketball camps. I was a camp counselor. I was a part of different activities relating to kids. And even when I got to college, I was involved in research with children, and I mentored at a middle school and a high school, and I coached basketball. And so you can pick up from that I love kids. And so that's, even though it had nothing to do with medicine, you still picked up that common theme.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's really important to kind of, you don't, and that also shows that you don't have to have a specialty that you want to go into from the start. But if you can kind of ground yourself and figure out what you may want from the beginning, it can really help streamline your application. I think it's great that if you do know what you want to do, but there's so many people who have no idea. Deborah or Olivia, do you have a specialty that you're interested in that maybe helped you with your application from the get-go, or are you just kind of figuring it out right now while you're in school?
So I have a specialty of interest, also pediatrics, but I definitely wanted to subspecialize, and I'm also really passionate about research. So my application was very research heavy, but that was something that I really had to explain, like being able to say that, you know, I did do a lot of research, but I am passionate about medicine, and this is why, and this is how I plan to have a career that incorporates both. So I'm very much so interested in pediatric hematology. It stems from an experience I had growing up. I've seen in the African-American community. So I wrote about that in my personal statement. I volunteered with at-risk teens. I mentor as well. And then coming into medical school, currently involved in hematology research. So I'm on the trajectory for that. So it is a big passion of mine, but like Hannah said, like you can come into med school not really knowing what specialty you want to do, and that's totally okay. And you can figure it out while you're here as well.
And I don't have as solid of an answer. I am interested in like something women's health related right now, but I also, our school does a cool program where we get to like shadow different specialists and like learn how to take patient histories from them in like little 6-week periods. And so everyone I've been paired with, I'm like, oh, I want to do this. And they've all been very different specialties. So I'm early and have a lot of time, but I do think I'm interested in women's health. And I did a lot of undergrad volunteer work and just like extracurriculars that was like women's health organization. I worked with like a volunteer birthing doula group. And then I worked with a shelter for victims of domestic violence and abuse, and it served primarily women. So again, your activities don't necessarily have to be like medical or like volunteering in a hospital to like meet those hours that you know feel like you need to meet. You can do stuff that like genuinely interests you, and I think that when that shows through, that's again what makes you stand out.
Thank you all for sharing that. So the poll, I just did a poll, and it's 50-50 pretty much about people who know what they want to do versus not, which is pretty typical. So you don't have to know what you want to do going in, but it's kind of cool if you do, because you can streamline yourself to that. Also, Dr. Witt, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but as a representative from a Caribbean medical school, I think there's a lot of questions about it and a lot of unknown, and you hear a lot of rumors, and just, can you just touch on that and what your experience was, and if you recommend it to anyone, and what, if you've had any difficulties or if you've had some successes from graduating from a Caribbean medical school?
Yes, absolutely. I'd love to share that. So I like to start off just by saying that, as we said earlier, your journey is your journey. Everybody's journey to get to where they are is going to be different. So for me, I actually applied twice to both MD and DO schools and didn't get in either time. And so I worked for almost 2 years before applying to a Caribbean school. And from there, basically because of my MCAT score. So my MCAT score was kind of low. And that really was the reason why I didn't get into a lot of American US schools. So for me, the Caribbean school was an option. It gave me an opportunity to still study medicine, but then because they follow the US guidelines, so we still take the step 1 and step 2 exams, just like the US medical schools do. That kind of streamlined me a little bit easier into the things that I needed to do once I got to medical school. But I had a little hesitation as well, just like I'm sure a lot of people do, just because the Caribbean stigma, I guess you can say. But truthfully, for me, it gave me a lot of experience that I don't think I would have gotten at a US medical school. So I met people from all around the world. I learned a lot of different cultures, learned a lot of different languages, ate completely different foods. I lived in another country for 2.5 years. And that alone, that forces you to grow up in a lot of different ways. And you use that when you become a doctor, when you're dealing with patients, because there's never going to be a patient that is going to be like you. And so it helps you relate to other people better and be more understanding of other people's situations. Especially for me, stepping outside of my comfort zone, living in a different country, completely different from the US. So from that perspective, I think it really helped me on my journey. Yes, there are always going to be challenges, just like with any other medical school. But from that perspective, I do think as far as learning the material, as far as taking the exams, it's pretty much the same. I hear the same complaints of my friends that went to the US medical schools. Professors don't teach this, they're not doing this right, or I wish they would do this. It's a school, no school is going to be perfect. And so you just have to keep that in mind. You're going to work your butt off to get what you got to get. And at the end of the day, you're the one that's going to push you to achieve what you're going to achieve. And so if you go in with that mindset, then I think regardless of what path you choose, then you'll be successful.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Dr. Witt. I think that's really insightful. I think a lot of us, we're so used to just thinking about the traditional MD and DO route. So thanks for sharing that. I think that gives another option for a lot of students. And so we also have, of course, our other application systems and types of medical schools, including DO and MD. Did each of you want to touch on a little bit of like why you decided to go that route versus the others, and sort of did you just apply DO and no MDs, or when you applied MD, you did both MD and DO, sort of that as well?
I can go. So I applied MD and DO. I applied to more MD schools than I did DO just because of sort of DO came at a last minute, and I think it sort of stemmed from two things. One, I sort of had a lower MCAT score, but I had a lot of experience in research. So I was pretty confident that, like I was going to get in. I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but I just figured, why not try? And then I had a DO mentor he was a mentor of mine when I was in high school. So I reached out to him just to see what he thought about me applying DO, and he was like totally for it. And after shadowing him in high school, he like always stuck in my mind because his way of being a physician was so unique and was so different than any of the other physicians I had shadowed. So I sat down and talked with him, and he gave me the rundown at DO schools and was like, this is what you need to know. This is where you should apply. This is what you should look for. And this is why I think you would make a great DO physician. And I told him about like my career and what I like saw myself doing. And he's like, you can be a DO and still do that. Like there's nothing that's going to stop you. So I added on, I think 10 DO schools, and I ended up interviewing only at DO schools, didn't get any interviews at MD schools. So I think it was just like fate. And during my interview process, it was like every single time I would interview at a DO school, they would always ask like, why DO, why DO, why DO? And a lot of the times I was like, I think it's just, there's so much out there that I don't know about, you know, OMM and like working with your hands, but there is a lot of wealth of information that shows like its efficacy and a lot of history behind it. So it was just like, there's so much I want to learn about it. And I think that really came through in my interviews. So yeah, I applied to both, but I think DO chose me. I always tell people that I think it chose me, and I'm so happy that I was accepted to a DO school.
I can also go. So I mentioned in my first introduction that I did not get in the first time I applied to school. And so I applied with the idea of not taking any gap years. So I applied like between my junior and senior year of college, which I don't know the age ranges of everyone on here, but it's very doable, but it's also like really not a fun time. So just I advise everyone to, you know, think about what you think your timeline is and make like a pro con list for like, what would the pros be of me going straight in? And like, what would the pros be of me taking a gap year? I think it's really important for everyone to explore. I've had a lot of like pre-meds ask, you know, when should I start studying for the MCAT? But then like the deeper question is like, when do you actually like want to start med school? Looking back, I definitely appreciated having a couple years of not planned on my part, but you know, hindsight's 2020, and I should have given myself that time to live like a more normal, like post-grad year or two. But I did apply to both. I ultimately, the program I'm at was like one of my dream programs. I did interview at more DO schools than MD schools. And I loved a lot of the schools I interviewed at. So for me, it just came down to, I'm from around the city of Chicago, and Rush had just been like on my radar and was where I really wanted to go. So, you know, I didn't have a mindset of like, I need MD or I need DO. I knew, I know Dr. Witt mentioned this, but like, there's so many ways and so many paths to get to like your ultimate dream. And you just need to be willing to work hard and to take whatever path is open to you. And I do think, like I said, everyone ends up where they should be for a reason. So you learn a lot no matter how you get there.
Thank you. I think that's so important because a lot of people do have self-made perceptions about the different paths. But for me personally, I chose a DO school because it was closer to home, and I got accepted to both. And I was just like, well, am I going to enjoy my family life as well as this crazy life? And that was more important to me. But at the end of the day, like, we're all going to be called doctor, we're all going to be colleagues. So it really is like, what's important to you. And and I love what Deborah said about how DO chose her. It's like, but also she chose DO. Like it's you also have that say, and that's really important. So when you pick a program, you need to make sure it aligns with you as much as vice versa. Indy, do you have any, or do we have a question in the chat? Oh, someone asked, have you ever been afraid to be stuck in a specific specialty? Kind of circling back to that discussion.
I guess I don't have an answer for this. I know I'm not a panelist, but I've thought about this a lot. Like, I'm really interested in pediatrics as well as internal medicine because I can't decide, hey, do I want to, like, I really don't want to let go of one population versus the other. I really love kids, but then, you know, seeing kids all day, I'm going to miss seeing adults. Like, I want that mixture. So I feel like I'm at an odd position. I've been looking at different specialties. There's one called Med Peds where you get certified in both internal medicine and pediatrics. And so I don't know if I'm going to do that. I'm very up in the air. Do I decide one? Do I go into the other? But maybe Dr. Witt could speak to this more, but that's some stuff that goes through our minds as medical students.
Yeah, for sure. So I know plenty of people that when we first met, you know, our first year in medical school, they were so gung-ho about, this is the specialty I want to pursue. This is it. They got to their clinicals and they said, nope, this isn't for me, and completely changed. For instance, I had a friend who just recently was so interested in internal medicine and now wants to do OBGYN. and one that wants to do emergency medicine that was interested in pediatrics. So it really, if you know that's what you want to do, then great. But don't ever feel like just because you came into medical school with this thought of this is what I want to do, this is the specialty I want to go into, that you can't change it. You can change your mind as much as you need to until you have to pick, essentially, which would probably be the end of third year of medical school. But you have time to think about it. So take your time, think about it, gain some experience, get some mentors that kind of help you through it. And once you know, you know.
Someone just asked a question in the chat. It's a little bit off topic, but since we don't have a lot of questions at the moment, what is your opinion about step one being pass or fail? How true is it that DOs and international graduates would have to work harder and do more to match for residency? Either Dr. Witt, if you have personal experience from that, or Deborah or Olivia, if you can kind of touch on maybe some rumors you've heard or something that's been going around.
So I can speak to some of this. So step one was definitely not pass fail when I took it. But I think step one being pass fail has pros and cons. Step one, especially as an international medical graduate, it was very stressful because for us, your step one score determined your life path. So if you got a very low score, you're going to have to work twice as hard to make that up for whatever specialty you want to apply to. But because it's pass fail, then that is not going to be the case. You're either going to pass or you're going to fail. And I'm sure all you guys will pass. But I do think that's going to put more of a weight on step two now. So I'm not really sure how that's going to work out. But I feel like once you learn how to study for step one, you know more so how to study and prepare for step two, just based off of my experience. They're very similar. It's just a little bit of a different twist to it. As far as having to work harder to match into residency, honestly, if you do well on your step exams, you do well in your courses, it speaks for itself at the end of the day. Yeah, you're an IMG. Some programs don't necessarily like that, but you also do your research on the schools, and there are plenty of schools out there, plenty of programs that accept international medical graduates. There's a deficit in medicine, period, as in physicians in the physician world. And so you have to make up for it somehow. And so there's programs out there, there's positions out there that plenty of IMGs match into without any trouble.
I think at my school, so Comlex just became pass fail 2. So it's sort of like the equivalent for the DO. I think it just, yeah, I believe it just became pass fail for our class. It's the equivalent of step 1 for DO students. And basically, we also at KCU also have a pass fail curriculum. So we are accustomed to, not getting like number scores on most of our tests. So it sort of translates well. I think that when it comes to like STEP and Comlex, you're sort of just in a space where you study to know the material so that you can do, like sort of like Dr. would say, so you can do well in step 2 and Comlex 2, because you take that then the third year when you're applying to residency. In terms of like matching at like for DOs, I would say at least at KCU, I can only speak because I've only been seeing their match process. A lot of the students, they apply to programs based off location and whether or not, it's a fit for them. So I think you really shouldn't like limit yourself in a sense. Like if you feel like you want to be in a certain location in the country and, you're trying to shoot for like EM or surgery, even if no one's done it before you, like you can be the first. I know there's a girl in our school who was the first DO student to match into EM at Emory. Like they never really accepted DOs before and she matched this year. So, and she basically came out and said like, she didn't have the best step score. She didn't have like a top Comlex score, but she just set her mind to it and interviewed well, got really strong letters of recommendations and made it happen for herself. So I think sort of just depends on the type of place you want to be for residency. And that can sort of set your trajectory.
Yeah, I think that was great, great insight. And I'm obviously only an M1, so this is not something I've experienced yet, but it was something that I knew was in the works also when I was applying. So this was something that like I asked a lot about and looked into a lot myself, because, you know, it's a big change to how things have been. But I do think that it is a change in the right direction. I know that mental health and wellness is something that often suffers for medical students. And especially with this year being in like the pandemic, I think that it's showing that they care more about a number. Like, think about how stressed some of you guys are who've taken the MCAT already, how much you obsess over that score. And I feel like it's just amplified even more. So it's going to force some of these residency programs to like look at people more holistically. So I don't think it's going to necessarily hurt you if you aren't from like a traditional MD program. I think that it's going to like change the system in a way that is promoting like student wellness and giving students the chance to explore their interests outside of just like cramming some useless biochem pathway into your brain so you can get a couple points higher because you feel like that's going to determine your future. So that's my take on it. Obviously, I haven't had it yet, but I'm very excited that it's pass fail. Our curriculum is also pass fail. And I think that that's like the norm, more or less so nowadays, for most med schools to be pass fail. So it's kind of, it seems kind of silly that they would have it all pass fail and then make you take this test where you feel like every single point counts. So I think it's a step in the right direction. And it sounds like Deborah and I will be some of like the guinea pig classes to see how it goes. So, you know, by the time some of you guys are there, we'll see if it was a good move or not.
I think I'm crying a bit because my school's not pass fail. So someone asked, now that the residencies merged, do DO students need to take CONLEX and STEP? I'll answer this real quick. So for DO students, our licensing exam is the CONLEX. So we have to take the CONLEX to receive our degree, so to become doctors. So we can take the USMLE or what people call the STEP. You don't have to, but most residencies like to see both, but that doesn't mean you have to. It is recommended, like strongly recommended, to take both. But you can take that with as you will, but by the time most of you probably go through, it's going to change. It changes every single year. Essentially, whatever the STEP does, the CONLEX follows very shortly after. So just keep an eye out for when you go through and make that decision for yourself.
For sure. Thank you for sharing, everyone. Just got one question here. And so as circling back to applying to medical school, sort of getting out of medical school real quick, how far in advance should you start preparing for the medical school application, whether that be your personal statement or writing your experiences out? If you had some recommendations for people getting ready for the application or taking a gap year, when would you recommend them starting?
Truthfully, I would say start as early as possible. Freshman year, I kind of wrote down all of my activities that I had done up to that point. And then I just had a Word document that I kept track of as I added to them. Make sure I had the professor's names or whoever was in charge, and contact information. I wrote down, I guess, like little short blurbs of what exactly I did, the length of time. That way, when it came to the application process, I didn't have to think too hard or mess up on something. It just made it easier to just write it out and enter in the dates into the system.
I did not do that, and that would have been like very helpful. So yeah, thinking of like some sort of tracking sheet, and you don't have to be like, you know, super up on it, but if you at least have some form of a running document that you like have in one place, that would have been like, if I could go back and advise myself, I would definitely do that. Another thing I really think of is really reaching out to professors early who, if you are going to use a professor as a reference, I'm pretty sure at least one of them has to be like a professor of sorts, but ask those references early. And like, if you are maybe any of you on here a freshman or sophomore. I know at my school, like a lot of the professors that I ended up reaching out to were ones that I like took multiple classes that they taught. Like it's hard. I went to a really large undergrad, so I felt like it was kind of hard to stand out, but at least, you know, they can see that you had some continuity with them and attended their office hours here and there. So thinking of that early on, I think is also very wise, and reaching out to those people sooner rather than later. I would say honestly, like around this time in the year, if you are thinking of references, like around March or April would be a really good time to start reaching out. So people applying now, like I would do that soon, just so that they have time, you're respectful of their time. A lot of these people are so busy, so just like you giving them the time is going to look much better on your end and probably result in a better letter if you're respectful of their other like responsibilities. And also gives you time if like they want, it's someone you haven't seen in a couple years, like you could reconnect with them. Like I know right now it would be virtual, but just like leaving room for them there to be some back and forth, since you're asking them to do something that could potentially be really impactful for your application.
Yeah, everyone's pretty much said what I would do. Get it done as early as possible. I also was super last minute. When it comes to the personal statement, I'll touch upon that. I feel like that's something you can start, you know, like let's say, you know, you're not applying this cycle, but you want to apply in the summer of 2022, for example. The personal statement is something like the prompt at least every year is pretty much the same. Like, why do you want to be a physician? So if you at least start to like write down like some thoughts and outline, you can really like workshop that, like talk with your friends, your family, people who aren't in medicine at all, and just workshop that. I feel like the more time you have on your personal statement, the better. And I feel like everyone says it's like your personal statement will never really be like completely done. I feel like mine was never completely done, but getting it to a point where you feel comfortable, like you can submit it, and giving yourself the most time to do that. So that's what I would recommend when it comes to personal statement.
Thank you all so much for speaking today. We're coming up on the hour, so if we do have a few questions that run over, feel free, more than welcome to stay on. I am going to share my screen real quick because I do want you guys to have the QR codes for the next event. Can you guys see my screen? I was not doing Anki during this, I promise.
While she's working on that, there's a couple questions in the chat. Basically, both of them are talking about post-bac programs and maybe not doing as well as they wanted during their undergrad, maybe not getting the GPA that they wanted. Not sure if some of the panelists struggled with this as well. Did they end up taking some classes or think about post-bac programs or might be familiar with it?
I can add, I didn't do a post-bac, but I did do a master's program after I applied. So one of the programs I mentioned, I applied thinking I was going to take a gap year. And then one of the programs I applied to was a DO school, and they actually have several like professional programs at their campus. And one of them was a biomedical sciences master's program. And I already had all the classes I needed, but it was just kind of taking those at the master's level. I was just trying to think of, you know, I wanted to apply again. I knew I wanted to apply again, but I wanted to change something in my application. I didn't have like a horribly low GPA, but it was something I was like, okay, this, you know, this could be higher. So when I did some of that self-reflection, I was like, this would be a spot that I can work towards and, you know, show that I was motivated enough to change between my two cycles that I applied. And I did not apply back-to-back years. I took like 2 years between the 2 cycles. But so I did a master's program, which kind of, I feel like served as like a post-bac almost in my case. It was all science courses, and I'm actually really glad I took it because I feel like in undergrad, sometimes you get like so bogged down in, I don't know, I just feel like sometimes I didn't focus on things that were like really relevant to like medicine. Like you were taking biochem for like anyone in so many different tracks in undergrad, whereas like I feel like a master's program or post-bac program might be a little bit more tailored to people going into like the health profession. So I really appreciated that. And it was like much more applicable, much more interesting. And at that point I knew I like needed to do super well because I wanted to raise the GPA, not go the other way. So I worked really hard and I did very well. And I think that really helped. I was asked a lot about that in my interviews, like why I chose to do that. And I said, like I wanted to show you guys, I like wanted to improve myself and be a better applicant. So if that's something that you're considering, then definitely, I don't think it's like looked down upon at all, especially if you're doing it because you might have not known you were pre-med all through college. That's also very normal. I have many people in my class, including my roommate, like didn't know she was interested in medicine until pretty much senior year. So she did a post-bac program. They're, I feel like, becoming increasingly common, and that's very normal for you to like not know exactly what you want to do as a 17-year-old starting college. So definitely pursue that if you think it's something that would help your application.
And I'd just like to add to that, a lot of admissions committee, they like to see improvement. So just because you didn't do as well as you would have liked in your undergrad courses, when you take those additional courses after graduation or you do a post-bac program and they see that you did well, then they'll be like, okay, well, maybe it was a fluke that happened, or maybe something life-changing happened during those times. And also a lot of times in the secondary application, they do ask if there's any part of your academic span that you would like to expand upon, or a reason why you had any challenges or difficulties or something like that. It's been a while, but it's something to that nature. So that's your chance to explain to them if something happened, or if it was you trying to adjust to studying that amount of material. And that's your chance to explain to them that that's what happened.
Great. Yes, thank you. I think everything that was said is very relevant, especially I didn't take a post-bac, but I know that the people who did really enjoyed it and thought it was really beneficial. So thank you for providing your expertise on that. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see everyone again, but this will be posted on the Facebook page and it will be sent out as well if you did not get the codes. But if anyone has any last minute questions, I think we're going to end our panel. Thanks for joining us and for supporting Med Mentors. And thank you so much to our panelists for taking the time out of their very busy lives to join us today. We really appreciate it. And congratulations, Dr. Alex, for matching. We cannot wait to
Thank you.
That is such an accomplishment. So thanks for joining us and hopefully that you can celebrate before you start.
And also, if the panelists would like to provide email addresses, I know sometimes people have extra questions that they feel more comfortable asking through email. So,
and you don't have to. That is completely.
Yeah, you don't have to.
We're not forcing you to answer questions.
Thank you for hosting this. Yeah, if you scroll up, my email was up there earlier. I love talking with students and procrastinating, like doing the schoolwork I should be doing. So I would be very eager to talk to anyone who wants. It was so nice to virtually meet you all. This was super fun.
It's great to meet you too. I'm actually from Chicago, so it was nice to.
Oh, fun. Where are you from?
I'm going to stop sharing.